My beloved child, in the stillness of a sleepless night, the seeker lay burdened by thoughts too heavy for rest, his soul wandering through shadows of doubt and unseen fears. The air grew strangely alive, and from the silence emerged a voice soft, yet piercing, calling his name as though it had known him long before time itself. Then came another, colder whisper, curling through his mind. No one will save you. It was the whisperer, planting seeds of despair. Caught between these unseen forces, the seeker stirred, not in weakness, but in the quiet awakening of a destiny he could neither deny nor yet understand. How is your child's health today? Please share in the comments so we can all pray for each other. In the hush that followed the first unsettling whisper, the night seemed to draw a deeper breath, as though the unseen world itself had turned its gaze upon the seeker. Then, from beyond the veil of ordinary sound, another voice emerged, low, steady, and suffused with a quiet authority that did not demand, yet could not be ignored. It carried no sharpness, no haste, only a timeless calm. Lay your burdens upon me and be at rest. The words did not strike his ears alone. They settled into the hidden chambers of his spirit, awakening something both ancient and noble within him. Yet the whisperer, cunning and relentless, rose again, threading doubt through the fragile stillness. Do not be deceived, it murmured, cold as distant stone. Peace is a lie told to the weak. Its voice clung to his fears, recalling every failure, every unanswered plea, every night he had endured in silence. The weight of it pressed upon him, threatening to bend his will. But the guide did not contend with noise or force. It answered with a presence unseen, yet unmistakably near. You have been carried through more than you remember, it said, each word measured like the tolling of a distant bell. You stand still, not by chance, but by grace. Thus the seeker stood between two realms, one that was accused and one that was restored. His breath slowed, though his heart trembled, for he sensed that this moment was no mere illusion of the mind, but a crossing subtle and profound. He did not rush to choose, for there was a dignity in his hesitation, a refusal to be ruled by fear alone. And in that sacred pause, where doubt contended with quiet truth, the first fragile thread of peace began to take hold within him. The stillness that followed felt older than the night itself, as though time had thinned and something long concealed was preparing to be revealed. The guide's presence drew nearer not in form, but in knowing, and its voice carried a weight that stirred both awe and unease. You are not as you have believed, it said, not as a comfort, but as a declaration. What you have endured was not without design. The seeker stood motionless, the words settling upon him like a mantle he had not yet learned to bear. Then the air shifted, and from the quiet depths of his own memory emerged another presence, ancient, watchful, and solemn. It did not speak at first. It was simply unveiled. Fragments of the past rose before him, not as distant recollections, but as living moments, the sorrow he had buried, the betrayals he had carried in silence, the nights when despair had hollowed his strength. This was the keeper, the guardian of what had been hidden, not to torment, but to reveal. At first the seeker recoiled, for he had long believed these memories to be marks of weakness, proof of a life fractured and misdirected. Yet the guide's voice returned, steady as ever. What you call brokenness was your shaping. What you call loss was your refining. And in that moment, something shifted. The past, once heavy with shame, began to take on a different weight, no longer a chain, but a foundation. The revelation was neither gentle nor cruel. It was true. The seeker was not a man abandoned to misfortune, but one forged through it, and though the mystery of his calling remained veiled, he understood this much. He had not been wandering aimlessly. He had been prepared. The night did not pass, it deepened, as though some unseen threshold had been crossed. What had begun as a whisper now gathered force, and the whisperer returned not as a distant murmur, but as a presence that pressed upon the seeker's very mind. Its voice no longer coaxed, it accused. Look at what you have been, it hissed, and with those words, the past did not merely return, it surged. Shadows, thick and formless, seemed to rise from within him, shaping themselves from memory and regret. Faces half forgotten, failures once buried, moments of weakness he had long sought to outrun, all came alive with dreadful clarity. They circled him, not in silence, but in a chorus of condemnation. Each thought grew heavier than the last, until even his breath felt borrowed, as though the darkness itself claimed dominion over his soul. The seeker faltered. For a moment, only a moment, yet vast as an eternity, he believed the accusation, that he had been mistaken, that the promise of purpose was an illusion, that the peace he had felt was nothing more than a fragile deception, easily shattered. The guide's voice seemed distant now, as though buried beneath layers of noise and despair. And yet, even as he stood at the edge of surrender, there remained something unbroken within him. Not strength, not certainty, but a quiet resistance, almost imperceptible, that refused to yield completely. It was there, in that trembling boundary between collapse and endurance, that his true nature revealed itself not in triumph, but in refusal to be wholly undone. For though the shadows advanced and the whisperer pressed its final claim, the seeker did not fall. He bent, he wavered, but he did not relinquish the last flicker of faith. And in that fragile, defiant ember, the battle remained unfinished. The hour grew thin, as though the night itself held its breath. Within that suspended stillness, the conflict reached its fiercest form not in the world beyond, but within the seeker's own depths. The whisperer spoke first, its voice sharpened by certainty. "You are weak," it declared, each word striking with the weight of remembered failure. "You have always been. What you felt was an illusion. Return to what you know: doubt, fear, silence." Its words found their mark, echoing through the chambers of his mind where old wounds still lingered. Then, without haste and without force, the guide answered, "You are chosen." The words were simple, yet they carried a gravity that did not argue, it affirmed. Not for ease, but for purpose. Not because you are without flaw, but because you endure. The contrast was stark. One voice reduced him to his past, the other revealed him through it. The seeker stood at the threshold of decision. There would be no sign, no miracle to compel him, only the quiet, unyielding necessity to choose. The darkness offered familiarity, a return to the known weight of despair. The light offered something far more demanding: trust without proof, strength without certainty. His breath slowed, though his heart trembled. He saw clearly now that the battle was not between two voices, but between two understandings of himself. To yield to fear was to accept a smaller truth. To trust the light was to step into something greater, though unseen. And so, not with triumph, but with resolve, the seeker inclined his will, not away from fear, but beyond it. In that moment, subtle yet profound, he chose not the absence of darkness, but allegiance to the light, and the path before him, though still hidden, began at last to open. What followed his choice was not a sudden peace, but a shifting subtle at first, then unmistakable, as though the very current of his being had been redirected. The air around him did not brighten, yet it felt altered, as if an unseen order had taken hold where chaos once reigned. The seeker sensed it within himself. His thoughts no longer surged unchecked, but moved with a measured weight, as though each one now passed through a hidden fire before it could take root. It was then that the presence of another emerged, not gentle like the guide, nor sharp like the whisperer, but steady, unyielding, and exact. The refiner had come. He did not speak in comfort. His voice, when it came, bore the cadence of iron meeting flame. What has been chosen must now be formed. There was no threat in his tone, yet no softness either. The seeker understood without being told that this was no stage of ease, but of making. Soon the work began. The seeker found that his thoughts, once wild and relentless, were now called into question. Each fear, each impulse of doubt, rose only to be met by a quiet resistance, as though an unseen hand demanded, "Is this truth?" And in that asking, he was forced to confront himself. It was not the whisperer alone that troubled him now, but the echoes of his own habits, long unchallenged. To master them was no simple act of will. It was a discipline that demanded attention, vigilance, and a patience he had never before possessed. At times, the strain felt unbearable. There were moments when the old darkness seemed easier, when surrendering to familiar despair appeared almost merciful. Yet the refiner did not relent. Endure, he would say, not as encouragement, but as command. What yields too quickly is not transformed. And so the seeker endured. Days, or what felt like days, passed in this unseen labor. He learned to hold his tongue where once he would have spoken in haste. He learned to wait where once he would have grasped in fear. He learned, above all, that strength was not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to remain within it without turning away. The pain of it was real, though no wound could be seen. It was the pain of letting go of old patterns, old identities, old certainties that no longer served him. And yet, beneath that pain, something stronger was taking form. For in the quiet moments, when the strain lessened and the fire seemed to dim, the seeker began to perceive a change, not imposed from without, but rising from within. His spirit, once restless and divided, grew steadier. His mind, once clouded, began to clear. He was not yet whole. He was not yet at peace, but he was no longer as he had been. And though the path ahead remained veiled, the seeker carried within him now the first undeniable mark of transformation, the strength to continue, and the knowledge that the fire through which he walked was not meant to destroy him, but to reveal who he was becoming. At the end of a long inward road, the seeker came upon it, a door set where no door had stood before, framed not by stone nor timber, but by a presence that felt at once ancient and newly revealed. It did not gleam, nor did it call to him with spectacle, yet something within him knew. This was the threshold he had been led toward, the promise whispered in quieter hours now given form. He approached with measured steps, not in haste, but with the solemn awareness that this moment carried weight beyond understanding. His hand, though steady, bore the memory of all he had endured, the nights of unrest, the refining fire, the quiet victories no one had seen. And when at last his fingers touched the surface of the door, he felt not resistance, but stillness, as though it waited not for force, but for something else. He pushed. Nothing. No sound, no yielding, no sign that it had even acknowledged his attempt. The stillness remained unchanged. A second time, with greater resolve. Still nothing. It was then that the whisperer returned, its voice curling through the silence with cruel familiarity. "Do you see now?" it murmured, almost gently. "All that struggle, all that faith. For this, a closed door, an empty promise." The words were not loud, yet they carried a sharpness that struck deeper than before, for now they seemed to align with what he saw. The seeker did not answer, but the tremor within him betrayed the battle rekindled. Doubt, once driven back, began to rise again, not as a storm, but as a quiet erosion. Had he misunderstood? Had he mistaken endurance for direction, hope for truth? He stood before the door, neither retreating nor advancing, caught in that fragile space where certainty dissolves. The silence pressed upon him, heavier than any accusation. There was no immediate comfort, no guiding voice to steady him, only the memory of what he had believed and the stark reality before him. For a moment, the temptation to turn away grew strong. It would have been easy to conclude that the path had ended here, that the promise had been nothing more than a fleeting illusion, a kindness imagined in darker hours. And yet, even as the whisperer pressed its claim, the seeker did not step back. There was something in him quiet, persistent, and unyielding that refused to declare the journey meaningless, not because he felt certain, but because he had come too far to deny what had already been wrought within him. So he remained, not triumphant, not assured, but present, standing before a door that would not open, holding a faith that no longer felt strong, yet had not fully failed. And in that stillness, where expectation met silence, the true weight of belief was laid bare, not in what was given, but in what endured when nothing was. The silence before the sealed door lingered until it seemed to gather meaning of its own. Then the guide returned, not with comfort, but with clarity that cut through uncertainty like a hidden blade. "The key you seek was never meant to be found in your hand," it said, calm and unwavering. "It is not wrought of metal, nor given by chance. It lives where your fear has not yet yielded within your true faith." Before the seeker could fully grasp these words, the air shifted once more. From the threshold itself emerged a presence neither hostile nor welcoming, but resolute beyond persuasion. The gatekeeper had come. Cloaked not in shadow but in quiet authority, it regarded the seeker as one weighs truth itself. "You have come far," the gatekeeper said, its voice neither harsh nor kind. "But distance does not prove belief." A pause followed, heavy with consequence. "Tell me, Do you trust what you cannot yet see? Or have you only walked as far as your certainty allowed? The question did not echo outward. It descended inward, striking deeper than any accusation the whisperer had ever cast. For this was no voice of deception, it demanded no answer of words, only of being. The seeker felt the tension rise within him once more, the subtle pull between what is professed and what is lived. The whisperer stirred faintly, eager to exploit the hesitation. You believed when it was easy, it pressed. Now with nothing before you, what remains? The seeker closed his eyes, not to escape, but to search. And there, beneath the noise of fear and the weight of doubt, he found it not certainty, not sight, but a quiet, unwavering consent. Not a declaration, but a surrender. When he opened his eyes again, nothing in the world had changed, yet something within him had. And though no key appeared in his hand, the door before him no longer felt beyond reach. It was not with force, nor with urgency, that the change came, but with a quiet alignment, as though something unseen had at last found its rightful place. The seeker stood before the door, no longer striving to open it, no longer questioning its silence. What had shifted was not the barrier before him, but the posture within him. And in that stillness, where doubt no longer ruled, the threshold answered. The door opened, not with a sound, but with a yielding so natural it seemed as though it had never been closed at all. Beyond it lay no spectacle of gold or sudden triumph, but a vastness clear, ordered, and filled with a presence that carried both peace and weight. The seeker stepped forward, and at once he understood. This was not the end of his seeking, but the beginning of his charge. The guide's voice returned, deeper now, as though echoing through the very fabric of what had been revealed. What you have received is not yours alone, it said. You are to walk, to bear, to give. The blessing is not possession, it is purpose. The realization settled upon him with a gravity greater than any trial he had faced. This was no reward for endurance, but a calling that demanded it. The strength he had gained was not for rest, but for service. The peace he now felt was not escape, but preparation. And yet, even as clarity took root, a familiar presence stirred. The whisperer had not vanished. Faint, distant, yet unmistakably present, its voice lingered at the edge of thought, not defeated, but diminished. It no longer commanded as before, yet it remained, a shadow that would test what had been formed. Not to destroy, but to reveal whether the seeker's faith would endure beyond this moment. The seeker did not turn away from it, for now he understood. The journey was not a passage from darkness to light, but the learning to walk in light while darkness still followed. Dawn did not break with spectacle, but with a quiet certainty that settled upon the seeker like a mantle long prepared. He stood where once he had trembled, no longer governed by the shifting winds of fear, but steadied by something deeper, something forged through trial and chosen in silence. The man who had once wandered in confusion had not vanished. He had been transformed. His weakness had not been erased, but understood, disciplined, and brought into alignment with a greater purpose. Those who crossed his path sensed it before they could name it. There was a calm about him, not distant, but grounding, a presence that did not impose, yet invited. He spoke little, yet his words carried weight, as though drawn from a well not of his own making. To the weary he offered not easy answers, but direction. To the broken, not pity, but a steady reminder that their story had not ended. He did not claim to be beyond struggle, rather, he walked with a quiet awareness that struggle itself had become a place of meeting, not of defeat. The guide's voice remained, not as command, but as companionship. And the whisperer, though no longer master of his thoughts, still lingered at the edges, a shadow permitted to follow, that truth might be proven again and again. For the seeker now understood what few ever come to see. The battle does not cease when light is found. It continues, refined and revealed, in each step taken thereafter. Yet he no longer feared this, for he had learned that victory was not the absence of darkness, but the refusal to walk within it. And so he went forward, not hurried, not hesitant, bearing within him a light that did not belong to him alone. It moved with him, through him, quietly touching all who drew near. Far ahead, the horizon remained uncertain, and beyond it, shadows still gathered. But he walked on. The story points to a practical truth. Growth begins when you stop running from fear and start examining it with honesty. Doubt will always have a voice through past failures, anxiety about the future, or the pressure to prove yourself, but it doesn't have to decide your direction. Real faith, in everyday terms, is not blind optimism. It's the discipline of choosing what aligns with your values, even when outcomes are uncertain. Progress rarely feels dramatic. It looks like managing your thoughts, being patient when results are slow, and staying consistent when no one is watching. The closed-door moments are especially important. They test whether you're committed to the process or just chasing quick rewards. Often, what feels like rejection is actually refinement, preparing you for responsibility, not just success. As you grow, you'll realize challenges don't disappear. You simply become more capable of facing them. For both young people and adults, the key lesson is this: don't wait to feel ready or perfect. Start with small, steady choices, guard your mindset, act with integrity, and keep moving forward. Over time, that quiet persistence becomes strength, and that strength becomes the light others can rely on. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like and comment one if you find the story meaningful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more similar stories. See you in the next part.